This presentation is to address some questions that we get all the time, and that is, what are the funding sources that come to UDOT and how are those funds allocated? There are 5 different funding sources that come to the Department of Transportation. One of them is the Transportation Investment Fund. That makes up about 43% of the dollars that come in. These fundings are from the sales tax, auto-related sales tax. The next fund is the transportation funds. The majority of these funds come from something that we're all familiar with, and that is the gas tax at the gas pump. The next source is the federal highway funds. It makes up about 23%, and these are from the gas tax that we pay at the pump, but it's the federal portion. And then lastly, we have the rural transit and aeronautics. They both make up about 1%. The rural transit are funds that come through the Federal Transit Administration, and aeronautics funding comes through state aeronautics, the fuel tax on planes. So the first one we're going to cover is transportation investment funds, and this makes up 43% of the funding that comes to UDOT. The majority of these funds come from auto-related sales tax. There's a little small portion that comes from vehicle registration, as well as motor fuel and special fuel. Here's the breakdown of the funding that comes in and each of those sources. There is a small portion that is transferred from the transportation funds. It makes up just over $27.3 million that gets transferred into the TIF. This comes from the state gas tax on your motor fuel. The total revenue for 2017 is just over $657.6 million. 50% of the funds that come into the TIF get transferred to bond payments. This is to pay for projects that have already been funded. The balance, or the other 50%, goes to current projects in the program. Here's an example of the projects that are programmed with those funds. A couple examples. Mount View Corridor, you can see, has $67.5 million. Bangerter Highway Interchange at 600 West has just over $28.1 million. So all these projects deal with capacity improvements or to improve mobility, which is one of UDOT's drivers. Next source of funds is the transportation funds, 33% of the revenue. The majority of these funds come from motor fuel and special fuel. These are the gas taxes that you pay at the pump. There is a small portion that comes from motor vehicle registration and permits and fees. This is the breakdown of those funds. As I mentioned before, in the TIF, a portion of these funds are transferred to the TIF. It's that just over $27.3 million. The total amount of transportation funds that come from the fuel tax is just over $506 million. So where do these funds get spent? You could look at these as really the operation and the running of the department. So your snow plows, your maintenance, region management, equipment management. There's also a construction management, which is projects that get funded with these funds. Of the gas tax that comes to the state of Utah, you can see from this diagram that almost 30% of it gets transferred to the B&C roads, which is your local city and county road funds, and they're able to use those funds. Here's a breakdown of the dollar amounts it goes into this pot. You can see from this that 36% of these funds are transferred to the B&C road funds, which is city and county funds, or to other agencies. Also, the portion that is transferred into the capacity or the mobility program of TIF. Total of transportation funds that come to the state of Utah is just over $533 million. Of the other agencies that receive these funds, you have Public Safety, the Division of Finance, Tax Commission, as well as the Travel Council gets a small amount. In the construction management line item, 25% of these funds are used to match the federal program, which is required in order to use those funds. We'll be talking about the federal program shortly. The rest of these funds go to projects that are programmed in the department. Here's a breakdown of those programs, as well as the match requirement. Total for these is just over $110 million. The federal highway funds make up about 23% of the revenue that comes to UDOT. Those funds are divided between UDOT and the locals at an 80-20% division. Of the federal funds that come to the state of Utah, there's just under $352 million in 2017. $69 million of it was a pass-through or went to locals. The remaining balance, or just under $283 million, went to UDOT. Of the amount that comes to UDOT, the state match required to use those funds was $22.2 million, bringing the total to just over $305 million. The majority of those funds go to preserving and rehabilitating the system. There are also specific requirements in the funds that require safety programs as well as planning and research. There's a small amount of funds that go to help increase mobility. The remaining 1% of funding that comes to the department fall in two categories: the rural transit as well as aeronautics. On the rural transit side, the percentage of where these funds get spent are broken out by federal code in these categories. The dollar amount in these categories are as follows. You can see the total for the FTA rural transit revenue is just over $9.2 million. Some examples of where these get spent: the majority is on fixed routes. There is a small portion that goes to intercity bus, seniors and individuals with disabilities, as well as runs the administration portion of the rural transit piece at UDOT and planning. So breakdown of those funds, you can see the majority is the fixed routes. These routes you're probably familiar with. There are the Cache Valley Transit District up in Logan. You have the Cedar Area Transit System, or CATS, which is in Cedar City. You have Park City Transit. And there's also a transit system in the Uinta Basin called the Uinta Basin Transit Authority, who also receive these funds. There are a couple of fixed route expenditures that we have. We assist Greyhound in a fixed route between Denver and Salt Lake. We help assist in the portion that is in the state of Utah. The next grouping goes to those that are seniors or individuals with disabilities. You see that we spend almost just over $500,000 in this category. Lastly is aeronautics. Aeronautics, majority of their funding is from aviation fuel tax, as well as aircraft registration and a few dedicated credits. This is the breakdown of the funding in those categories. The total for the aeronautics revenue for 2017 is just over $7.4 million. Where do these funds go? The majority of these funds either are transferred to local airports to aid in their construction projects, as well as specific airport construction projects that are programmed through the Division of Aeronautics. The remaining portion goes to airplane operations, as well as admin and a small portion to Civil Air Patrol. Here are the dollar amounts. Again, you can see that aeronautics expenditures for 2017 was just over $7.4 million. That is a wrap for the funding sources and their allocation for UDOT. For more information, go to udot.utah.gov.